For anybody to seriously suggest now that what's happening in Israel and Palestine is not apartheid is shocking to me. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen the apartheid wall in Jerusalem. I was in Ramallah. I travelled to Hebron. I've seen what happened in Hebron, where that city and community are devastated to protect hundreds of settlers, illegal settlers. It's a damning indictment in our country that in the 1980s we led the way confronting the South African apartheid regime, yet today we can't even pass legislation that bans illegal settler goods. These settlements are illegal under international law, yet we do commerce with those who are responsible for that repugnant situation. We can't even do that. We can't even pass that law in this country. We can't recognise the Palestinian state.
History will judge those who sit on the fence, and history will shame those who bury their heads in the sand while the Palestinian people continue to suffer at the hands of an oppressive, brutal, occupying apartheid state that is Israel. Minister, you must act. You cannot afford to sit on your hands and not act. You must call Israel out for the apartheid policies and the apartheid regime in which they use against the Palestinian people.
The Amnesty International report is clear. It's devastating in its clarity. It concludes that Israel perpetrates apartheid. It notes that Israel's civilian administration, its military authorities, its governmental and quasi-governmental institutions are involved in the enforcement of the system of apartheid against Palestinians. It is as frank and as clear as that. It goes on to say that the scale and seriousness of these violations documented in the report make it clear that the international community needs to urgently and drastically change its approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and recognise the full extent of the crimes that Israel perpetrates against the Palestinian people, crimes that they commit, Minister, day and daily.
The report makes for disturbing reading. It outlines how Palestinians are dealt with as an inferior racial group and how Israel oppresses and segregates them. It shows how Israel is putting in place a regime aiming to dominate and oppress Palestinians. It does this through territorial fragmentation, segregation and control, dispossession of land and property, and by the denial of economic and social rights, but also through forcible transfers, administrative detention and torture, unlawful killings, denial of basic human rights and freedoms, and by persecution.
Ireland has a long and proud tradition of support and solidarity with the people of Palestine. While many of the crimes of Israel's apartheid have long been raised in the Dáil, the EU's central involvement in the arms trade to Israel has seldom been raised. EU members have profited well from Israeli apartheid over the years. Since 2012, EU member states have sold arms to Israel to the tune of nearly 700 million per year. Between 2014 and 2018, Germany and Italy alone supplied 35% of Israel's arms imports. EU states make large profits selling deadly arms to states like Israel, states that frequently abuse international law, suppress and murder peaceful protesters.
Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil and Green TD stood up one after the other, saying it was intolerable. The thuggery and the warmongering and the brutality of Putin, you wouldn't stand for it, urgent action had to be taken. But we've got to be much more careful with the Palestinians and their treatment. And I haven't even got time to the briefing I organised this week about the people of Yemen and how Saudi Arabia, the most despotic regime in the world, armed to the teeth by the United States, Britain, France and others, killing 337,000 people in Yemen in the last 5 years. 10,000 children. Any action against the United States for arming them? Or Britain, or France, or Saudi itself? No. No action, no sanctions, no outrage. Words of concern. We'll raise it. We'll raise it. We'll call on them.